So, as we know, in a professional environment, you're supposed to look, act, and be a certain way. While initially I did not always fit in, and as to me personally, but I gave the look every day.
In two cases, I was working overseas and in the US for government entities. I noticed the same type of thinking, even though they were two different countries, two different cultures, two different languages. I noticed the same types of things when you work in an area, you start to see, okay, I can see the pattern here. Hi, guys. This is Barika from Simply Unique Coaching, and I have on here Tameka Brown. Tameka Brown and I had a conversation a while back, and she shared with me her passion. So I said I would love to do a chat with you and a discussion with you. And really, for these conversations, I'm looking to have people who are in small businesses share what they are doing and their expertise, because I believe that there's a lot that the newer generation and people who want to do well and be people of excellence need to know. And so sometimes we can only go as far as what we know. So we need to have exposure to what is out there, what the other ideas are, and just different things of that nature. So I am so happy to have Tameka Brown on today, and she's going to share with us like information and tips about conflict resolution. So she specializes in that. She has well over 10 years. I want to say it was like, I'm not even going to try to say the number, but I know it was well over 10 years. And we had a lovely conversation, and just from the interactions I've had with her, I can tell she's just a very calm, concerned, and caring person. So I will let her share what she wants to on her end. But welcome, Tamika. Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much, Barika, for this opportunity. I look forward to sharing all of my gifts with your audience. Hello, my name is Tameka Brown. I am the CEO and founder of the Vent Zone. Um, Here in our community, we offer a safe and supportive environment for individuals to transform tension into opportunities for growth, whether that may be a life struggle or maybe a tricky situation that you're trying to navigate with others. We'd like to offer an opportunity to provide some constructive dialogue so that and where you an opportunity to seek advice and so that we can collaborate on solutions that you're dealing with conflict. Yeah,
All
I've
right.
been
And I
doing
love the name, the Vent Zone, too. So tell me, how did you come up with that name?
well. Oh, wow. That name stemmed from a personal feeling that I was experiencing. As a leader, I have about 24 years collectively in the nonprofit and government sector. I've been doing that for quite some time, toggling in between the two. My passion I've always been a very service-driven individual, ready to help the community and provide an opportunity of help wherever I can. So throughout my various positions, I have been placed in leadership roles, whether that has been directly or indirectly. And so, as a new leader and someone who was raised in a very urban environment at a young age, we all know for individuals in that population and underserved area, you don't always get the privilege of learning how to resolve conflict effectively and efficiently. Sometimes you don't get the communication skills that you need. It's almost learned with firsthand experience. Now, my mom did raise me. I come from a single family home, and which I am happy to say I turned out pretty well and thankful to my mother for that. But she did provide some good, solid morals and values. And those values were connected to given the opportunity to express yourself. So, throughout my childhood, as any child, you encounter some situations that mom and your parents are not so happy about. But if I encountered those situations, which were very far and in between, thankfully, I wasn't that horrible of a child. So, if I did get in trouble at home, my mom would, you know, do what she needed to do as a parent to in her disciplinary a form of discipline. And she would then say, now tell me, why are you upset? She would say, why are you upset? Why do you feel like what happened? So she would ask questions. So I learned early on that expressing my emotions were important. Now, I didn't always do it in the best manner sometimes. I didn't always apply what those, I'd like to say, things, values that she instilled in us. I didn't always apply that. And so then fast forward where here I am, a urban individual, and I've been placed in a professional environment. So as we know, in a professional environment, you're supposed to look, act, and be a certain way. While initially I did not always fit in, and as to me personally, but the look, I gave the look every day. I showed up every day, but there were certain encounters that where I was like, oh, yeah, this is not going to work. Okay, you need to go to your area to calm down if it upset me. So I realized that, you know what? I have to learn to navigate this and work through it with ease. And I needed a safe place to vent about things. I'm feeling uneasy, maybe some insecurities that I was feeling due to being in this environment and the expectations and the pressure that it was associated with it. But when I sat back with those fears and those insecurities, I knew that I needed to have a safe space. So, of course, naturally, what do? We go in and we want to see a therapist to resolve some issues, but that didn't necessarily do the trick because, of course, during that era, unfortunately, therapy was frowned upon in the Black community. It was a stigma that if you went to therapy, that you were crazy, and that's not necessarily the truth. I wholeheartedly supported and value any therapist and input because I think it could be very instrumental to one's development and growth. But in that safe space, I was able to provide and be open about what I was experiencing, my internal, because I didn't feel comfortable going to my leader or airing my dirty laundry at work. Um, I would like to say initially, I had a sense, my mom raised us with a great sense of pride about who we are and what we do. And so that kind of transitioned over into my professional life because what you do personally is what you do professionally in some way. So the vent zone came about after I sought out therapy and I said, okay, I realized that this was helpful. This was helpful. And I knew that other people were experiencing some of the same things, especially those that came from my population and didn't have the tools and the resources that they needed in order to learn how to effectively communicate and articulate their feelings, express them, and and have a safe environment. So that's where the vent zone was sprouted from. I realized that providing a safe and supportive environment for someone who didn't necessarily feel comfortable with expressing their true feelings at work, that this space could support them. It would support them indirectly to advance and leverage other opportunities within the workspace. So the vent zone I felt like would be a catchy name. Of course, immediately people would think, oh, well, we're just coming to dump our problems out and and just there, here you go, take it and move on. Well, that's not necessarily what we do. We don't just listen, we actively help our client base transform tension into opportunities for growth and connection, which I think that is what everyone is starving for today is connection, especially as we are post-pandemic, where there was a ton of isolation. So that's what the Fin Song kind of sprouted from my own personal struggles that I was dealing with. And I wanted to share that with others.
And what would you say is like one of the biggest transformations because you've had such a lengthy career inside of leadership? So like what is one of the stories that kind of sticks out to you of having to maybe walk someone through having to work through the concerns or the conflict that they were having and like where you look back and you're like, wow, I'm so glad I was able to help this person have a better life or make this situation better as a result of being made aware of it or being connected to these individuals.
Yeah, sure thing. I think that the most recent experience that just jumps out at me would be two of my employees were having a I like to say personality clash, interpersonality clash that they were experiencing with one another. And so I noticed different little spats and little sarcasm here and there. And as a leader, I've always been one to tackle those issues up front. I've always been one to get in front of the issue rather than wait until it festers and it just becomes this huge thing that you can't control. So there were a few unpleasant encounters that they were experiencing. So I decided to meet with the both of them individually, initially. Meet with them individually to kind of figure out what was going on, airing out my concerns while in the workplace, and along with my expectations of them as assets to our organization. So during that conversation, I was able to really get a sense for what that person was experiencing. My objective during that time is to observe what they are truly experiencing versus what they are saying they are experiencing. And to also ask thought-provoking questions to help them identify that as well. So that's the strategy. So after meeting with the both of them individually, I decided to meet with them collectively. And during that time, I shared both sides of the story and some things that I've noticed and some things that I've concerned about. And from a collaborative standpoint, because at this point, I wanted them to take ownership of this newfound relationship, I'd like to say, because let's start over. And during that time, they were both able to express how they truly felt without one being offended or defensive. Because sometimes that happens when you want to really honestly and openly express how you feel. And whenever there was a situation where I sensed there was some defensiveness, I would then ask that individual, what are you feeling? Why do you feel like this is an attack on you? Can you share your thoughts? And can you put your feelings into words at this time? And so then that opens up an environment for connection. And so then the other person can then see how that individual perceived their body language, perceive the comment. But it also, during that time, my goal is to help them identify where that all started and rooted from. Because the biggest thing is getting to the core of the issue. Well, after we had that session, I scheduled maybe 2 additional conflict resolution scheduled check-ins. But I'd like to check in with the staff. And they were like, wow, this really helped. And I finally got this off of my chest. It was a ton of relief that they felt with just really being honest and having that space to do so. And I know that all leaders don't have the time. I'm not going to say they don't feel like it's important. They may not have the time to address that, but I think it's very critical to the environment, the work environment, that we take the time to address those issues and try to resolve them as quickly as possible. So after the initial conflict resolution meeting that I set with them, then we moved on and I met with them. I did a few check-ins together to see how things were going. And they just raved. It was like, wow, I never had a leader that actually sat down and went through steps and helped me navigate some things that I was experiencing. And they were so grateful. And I'd like to say they're the best work buds now. They're bringing each other gifts and sharing lunches. I was like, now look at this. And it just really gives you, it really lets you know that the work that you're doing is rewarding.
And I think you said some critical things there because you walked the audience, including leaders, through the steps of what it takes to kind of need to resolve conflict. Because you're right, a lot of times leaders don't know that they really need to make the time for that. But even what I found is the leaders that I encountered that are making those types of mistakes, a lot of times they were never actually trained in leadership. And so they're like flying blind. They were a great, I was gonna say analyst or something like that. And they're like, oh, you're so good at being an analyst. Why don't you lead this project team? And you're like, I know numbers. And then they just throw you out there and then they're like, why is everything not happening? So it's important to have that insight and to know, there are actually some strategic steps that we should take and consider And it's okay if we mess up the first time that we try because, you're in that learning phase, but, also look at the benefits from the employees, because I feel like in the workplace or even in personal relationships, workplace, professional, in businesses or whatever, whenever we go through something difficult with somebody and we actually have the chance to talk through the hard things, man, when I tell you the best relationships come out of those. And so you hit something that I want to dive a little bit deeper into, which was you mentioned that you saw some symptoms
Yeah.
that were the team members were exhibiting that said, okay, I might need to come in here. So I'm going to ask you two questions. Actually, I'm going to combine them. So the first question is, when should we get involved as a leader, or when should we kind of back out and leave it alone? And then also, what are the symptoms that will indicate that there's something going on, even if we don't get involved yet, but what are like some of the red flags or yellow flags that we might see, because we want to hit them while they're yellow before they get red, right?
Yes.
But what are some of the yellow to red flags that we might see that says, okay, something might be going on here. There's a potential conflict going on that if we get ahead of it, we can keep it from blowing up into this huge, big, outburst or whatnot.
Yes. I'd like to say first that the first quality that I think a leader needs to possess would be emotional intelligence. Number one, it gives you the privilege to read a room with ease. And it really gives you the privilege to understand and connect with your staff as well. Symptoms, top symptoms I would like to say would be sarcasm, maybe a negative tone, undertone that the person have, their disposition, their body language. It always speaks volumes. You can tell when someone does not really think that I've ever had a pleasant encounter with this individual. Those are dead giveaways. Normally, the conversation or I'd like to say, they don't jump at the opportunity to connect or engage with that particular coworker.
Okay.
They shy away from conversations, and that person walks up and joins a conversation. They may walk away, or they may be silent. Or when they're working collaboratively on a project, you will notice that it's an individual. There's division. It's not a team effort. It's not, I can support you. How can you support me? There's division. So when you begin to notice, those are some telltale signs right away, I'd like to say. But then when the when it's time for the leader to kind of insert themselves or maybe get more involved in the situation, if when you notice that it's happening more often than usual, okay? More often than usual, say you noticed it maybe the first week. There were those subtle signs. Then we move to the second week, a little bit more, okay. And so the third week, I would say, call a meeting. Call a meeting and figure out, because it could be a one-time situation, or it could be a slew of situations that they may have encountered, and they're like, okay, this is the stick that broke the camel's back. I've reached my point here. I can no longer tolerate it, and here's why. Sometimes it is something personal, and while other times it may be something that they may have involved in the workplace. It may be a project where one person's slacking and the other person's carrying all of the weight. So scheduling a meeting individually to try to figure out what's going on. Now, you may encounter staff that may not be forthcoming and honest. If they don't feel the trust is there. If they don't feel the trust is there, there's an unlikely chance that they'll be open and honest about what's going on based on the experiences that they've had. But if there's a connection and there's a relationship that has been established, then those particular employees will open up, and it'll just be like a running faucet. And they'll just pour it all out and say, this is what happened, and this is why I'm upset, and why does he do this, or why does she do that? And initially you'll spot the blame. Everybody wants to blame everyone else. Okay, no, you encounter some situations where people will take full accountability for their actions in certain situations, but then it may not happen all the time. But I think that when on the third week, you want to get back in there, and you want to schedule those individual meetings and then explain to them, okay, now I'd like for you to be able to express how you feel to this individual in a respectful and a professional way, because you want to create and the environment for the both of them and set the tone for the conversation, because tensions will rise, of course, and situations where it's like, one may feel attacked, but I think being there to mediate the conversation and really let them know, okay, did you actively listen during that time? Did you hear what she said? Because I don't think that that's coming from frustration. I think that that may be coming from how she truly feels. So did you hear that? So I think that it's very important that a leader get out there, get up front, and just kind of tackle it as quickly as possible.
So I was thinking about different sectors and different things, and I've worked in profit, not-for-profit, government sectors, public, well, I guess government and public, but private sectors. I've worked in like a lot of different respects, overseas in the US, et cetera. And in two cases, I was working for overseas and in the US for government entities.
Mhm.
And I noticed the same type of thinking, even though there were two different countries, two different cultures, two different languages, I noticed the same types of things. And I know that you said your background is kind of in the nonprofit and then working with the government, public servants and that kind of thing. So I wanted to see if there is maybe something you want to hit at a high level, because just I know like sometimes when you work in an area, you start to see, okay, I can see the pattern here. And so if there's somebody, because I know a lot of people who work in government entities who they're promoted into different positions, but they're not necessarily given leadership training. So
Mhm.
that's a big deal because it causes a lot of I'm just gonna say it, negative environments, work environments, because the people are not skilled. And so the people underneath them are going home with this massive amount of stress that really doesn't need to be there. And in it, kind of what I get, the gist of it is like they weren't actually trained. Because
Yeah.
when I was in the other sectors, they intentionally train people or they put them with a mentor or somebody who could train them. But in the government sectors, at least from what I've seen, it's just like you got promoted because you did well in your job that was underneath the level that you're at now, that they promoted you to. So is there anything you want to add there, just in case somebody is working for a government leader, or if they are, and when I say government, it could be in education, it could be in the road,
Mhm.
it could be in any respect. It can be in I think they might have some county hospitals and things like that. Any time where you're getting paid from the state or the city or whatever. Anyway, so are there any thoughts that you have or any patterns that you tend to see when it comes to conflict, or anything you want to say to people in that particular arena so that they will
Oh.
know, okay, this is something I need to be aware of, or maybe this is how I can maybe handle conflict in situations where I work for the government?
I think the most important thing would be that those individuals really need to take their own personal training and development by the horns. That's a key factor in it. You must prioritize your own personal development. And there are some areas that people realize that they have, or some insecurities or flaws that they have internally, that they realize they have themselves, and they're really not actively doing anything to, or weaknesses, I'd like to say.
Mhm.
They're not actively doing anything to overcome those weaknesses. They're just ignoring them.
Mhm.
Culturally, in nonprofit environments, government environments, community service, those are organizations that may not have always, I'm not going to say every single one of them,
Mhm.
but they may not have always prioritized training and education. It may have been performance-based, especially in the nonprofit area. Sometimes you're working with a very, very small but mighty team. And so everybody may be stretched thin, and they training and education where? No, this is unheard of in our environment.
Mhm.
And then you have other nonprofit organizations that really um, take it as approach with the change management culture wise, that they really want to enhance the skill set of their employees so they incorporate a certain number of hours with professional development. But I would say I would encourage those individuals, number one, if you feel like you are inequipped to handle a situation and you need some additional training, don't be afraid to speak up about that. Don't be afraid to prioritize your learning and advancing your skill set while having a conversation during your performance review or evaluations, saying, mentioning, I need some additional support. You don't have to wear the Superman or the Superwoman cape. Take it off, fold it up, and place it away and put it away in a pretty box because it will get you nowhere quick. With that cape, it will get you nowhere fast. So the best thing that I would say and advice I would say is take your responsibility for your personal and professional development and speak up about that. Be open and honest about your needs. Because if you're placed in a situation where you're unable to handle it, it's going to make the matter worse. It's like adding gasoline to a fire. And in those environments, that as leaders in those environments, I would encourage them also to really think about as they approach the next planning year for performance evaluations, how can I incorporate a requirement for training and education with different common areas that leaders face? Conflict, it's 80% of what a leader deals with daily. Yearly, statistically, is what they say. It's 80% of it, and it's a lot. And sometimes people feel like, I really just don't have the time to handle it, but make time for it because it will improve the work environment tremendously.
Absolutely. And I'm going to add something to what you just said, because that was what made the big difference for me when I was my degrees are in international business and economics. And then while I was in college, I was also working for a well-known corporate organization as well. And they were huge into professional development. And then I moved eventually into education. So there were things that we had when I was under that corporate entity that I saw them trying to implement in the educational realm, but they didn't have the background knowledge. So it was like trying to do a development plan. It was like, okay, well, just write this up and just check this off. And it wasn't any follow through. There wasn't any, we used to call them MBOs, or there wasn't any two-way communication meetings. There wasn't any follow-up communication with the leader throughout the year to see how you're doing. And honestly, it wasn't really genuinely, I want to see you grow as a person. It was like, hey, this is on the checklist and we need to get it done. So if you are coming from an agency or another entity or industry, and please don't do that. That's just a waste of time. That's a waste of paper. Like, you genuinely have to have a heart for development. And when you do, what she just said is what's going to happen. You're going to have happier people working for you. They're going to love working for you, and you're going to enjoy work. It's going to put less stress. They will bend over backwards to make things happen to you. Yeah. I mean, for you, they will bend over backwards. They will bring you lunch, they will invite you to weddings and to their baby showers. I remember even visiting employees when, not during the birth, but after they gave birth, I visited them in the hospital. It was like you start to build those kind of relationships with people because they genuinely like you. And when people like you, they will do whatever they need to. And then you're not in it by yourself. And that's what you want. Okay, I'm gonna get off my soapbox.
And I just like to speak to it. So many new leaders, like you said, they genuinely like you. You want those relationships to develop organically. You don't want to go in with people pleaser mentality and the just wanting everyone to like you.
Yes.
It's not, it's unrealistic. It really is. And you're setting the expectation of yourself and putting a ton of pressure on yourself that you're going to please your employees every single day. So, but when they understand that it's coming from a good place and they respect you as an individual, they will understand some things must have to be done in order to enhance the workplace or keep it, at the level that it is, where everybody comes to work and has an enjoyable experience. I feel like you are there 8 hours of a day. Some connection must be made. It's like your second home at that time and your second family, whether you want it or not, because we all know we have family members that we could yeah, I could do without those family members today. But that's the same concept and analogy for work. It's an extension of your family. So whether you want them or not. And I know some environments may not always foster that, but be the change that you want to see. That is a quote that I live by, and I wholeheartedly, it connects with me and resonates with me so well. Be the change that you want to be. Now you can't go in and change every work environment, but at least bring the light.
Absolutely. And I'm going to say this, and then I'll give Tamika the last word and then we'll wrap up. But I was doing a podcast yesterday for another individual. And when we were talking about wealth and the wealth mindset. And one of the things that I mentioned, I said, after having the privilege and the opportunity to be around a lot of really, really wealthy people, I realized what they value. They value time. Rich people are people who want to be rich, and people who are rich, they value money and they value material things. Wealthy people the money, they already have that. They're not chasing the money. They value the time. Like they want to earn money, but they want their money to make money. Let me say that, but they value their time. And so I'm bringing this up for a reason, because when it comes down to what she and I are talking about is like professional development, save yourself some time. Yes, can you figure this stuff out on your own? Absolutely. Absolutely. But tell us one more time, how many years of experience do you have in leadership and in helping people through conflict? How many years?
24.
So she knows what she's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
then on the same side with leadership, I have like over 15 years. I just stopped counting. I'm putting just 15 plus, because I'm just not counting anymore. But
I know. Yeah.
at a certain point, it's just
Get
like,
to that point where it's like, yeah, okay. It's just, yeah, this is
it is. But the thing is, like, and I'll tell you, like, as I was building this business, as I've been doing different things, I have paid for mentors because it is worth me saving my time. Why am I going to waste 2, 3 years trying to figure stuff out when I can spend 6 months, a year, 12 weeks, whatever, a month in a program, a weekend, like I can glean from them. So I'm saying this to say, definitely invest in your personal development, like she was mentioning, because it's going to help you, and it's going to help you avoid the mistakes, because whether it's what we do or whether it's something else you need to develop in, it's going to save you time. Now, there's seasons of lives where we have to kind of pinch our pennies and we got to do what we got to do, but you can even exchange and barter. Like even if you said, well, I'm not saying Tamika is going to do this for you, but if you say, oh, Tamika, I want to learn conflict resolution skills, but I can't really afford your services. Can I do something else? I'm really good at this. Can I do something in exchange, for the equivalent? Like, like not saying that she's going to do that and not saying that, other people do it, but there are options out there. Like, don't waste your time. You can never get time back. So don't waste time. Don't waste time trying to figure stuff out that people have already sorted out, like just what she was saying, as far as what she walks people through with conflict, that is the same thing I do. I separate, yeah. And I was like, she definitely knows what she's talking about, because that is the same thing. I need to hear both stories by themselves without the other person in my ear. And then between the two, like she said, I can figure out kind of what really happened, my observations and what they said. Okay, now we can figure out. So yes. So yes.
And I think it's another key point to speak to that point, Barika, that when you are, I guess some work environments may say conducting an investigation, or when you're just trying to get to the root of the problem is what I like to say.
Exactly.
When you're trying to get to the root of the problem, there will be various stories, various opinions. It is very critical to come from a non-biased standpoint. Whether you see those personality issues or situations, or someone is exhibiting certain type of behavior and you recognize that behavior, as a leader, it is so critical to come from a non-biased standpoint, because employees sense that. And when they sense that, that is when they become very closed off and isolated and defensive. And then it not only festers an issue or builds an issue that they feel like, oh, well, my boss is taking her side and she doesn't like me or care for me anyway. You have to come from a very neutral standpoint. That is so critical. And to be objective with your approach and your solutions, because you want everyone to leave from the table. Like you mentioned, wealthy individuals, they look for opportunities where there is a win-win for that individual and a win-win for them. And so that's how you want to approach and you want to leave that situation. You want everyone to have a win-win. They felt heard, understood. There was some things There's a connection established, and we're able to get to some resolution. Now, I'm not saying that after the first meeting, you'll have a success. No, sometimes it may not be until the fifth that there's an aha moment, that where you find an opportunity or a window of hope, a glimpse of hope to be able to creep in and say, okay, here's the thing. And as a leader, it is also helpful after those meetings to sit back and really think through what some of those employees were experiencing, what was going on. Sometimes people are carrying things from childhood trauma and carrying it into the workplace, and they don't even realize it. So it's also another key point is to be very honest with your communication. Find a way to be honest and open to let them know, I have noticed this about you, and here's my concern. And then they may, again, open the opportunity to connect with you and share with you what the issue is. And so you can get to the root of the problem versus a surface level issue. But it does take time. I encourage leaders to handle conflict head on, because don't shy away from it, and just really, really handle it first, and keep it at the forefront of issues, because one bad apple can run the bag.
And
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Tamika. And then in the description, I'll have how you can get in contact with her if you have any questions or if you want to just reach out to her. But thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure. And
Yes.
I was like, she's always dressed so nice. So
Oh, thank you, Barika. I appreciate it. I hope that our shared time together was valuable, and individuals can reach out to me at yourventzone.com, and we can connect. I provide an array of workshops and coaching services, one-on-one group coaching, and speaking engagements. So you can connect with me there.
all right, perfect.
Thank you,
And with that
Barika.
being said, everyone, make it a great day. Take care. Bye.